Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss Pre-Market Report for June 6, 2017. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. Right now, we're basically holding at highs after a digestion day the previous session, where price basically traded in the upper distribution of the range 2 sessions ago. This morning, we're breaking down below those lows and pushing downward a little bit. Overall, the flow has been to the upside, and all pullbacks have been buying opportunities for new highs. So this recent pullback here could yet again lead to another buying opportunity, perhaps into as low as 17.5 to 19.5 could be the zone here where if price gets into that area, you could see another defense by the bulls for a rotation higher. Now, keeping 2420's bid for the most part would suggest a continuation up toward that 59.75 to 64 halves target zone. Failure to hold 20s would then likely rotate this thing back toward 2404 half and that 2400 level. That's the major zone in this chart, is at 2404 half. And as long as price remains above that area, much more strength is likely to be seen. So even a rotation here will be defended. Should price rotate even lower, look for bulls to come in at that area. So there's a lot of different zones here as the bulls continue to get paid on counter trend rotations. Now intraday, not really a whole lot here to speak of. Let's drop down for a moment. You can see how the previous session had a very narrow range, not a whole lot going on. A break of 24.33 this morning was the pre-market breakdown here, and then the bears held it as resistance as this thing continues lower. So right now, a downtrend in VWAP, that all suggests more weakness. Pullbacks to likely be defended here for new lows until a rejection occurs. Once a new low rejection occurs, that could signal a little bit of a bounce back toward value, perhaps even as high as previous 5-day VPOC, depending upon the strength of the move. But right now, given the slope of VWAP, all bounce is likely to be short-term selling opportunities. All right, here's a look at crude oil futures. Now, I mentioned last week that crude oil is starting to get into that zone where it's not really an easy trade here. It's chopping around VPOC. There's a value right in this area. It was chopping a little above it, got below, a little below it, but the trend is still down. And you notice that by yesterday's previous high being rejected, and that led to more weakness. Now bears are keeping price offered off the previous session's midpoint, and you have a very narrow range heading into RTH. So this all implies more weakness to the downside. Taking 46.69 offered would open up 45.20 as the next key level down. That's the FOMC level. There's a pair of FOMC levels there from, I believe, March and September. So we have a couple of them there, 45.17, 45.20. That's going to be the next zone down if this 46.69 fails to hold. And given the current down move, given the failed new high of the previous session, that all implies more weakness to the downside, at least short term. Price is going to need to reclaim 48.50 here to start this thing back up. And until that occurs, more downside pressure likely to come. If you take a look here at gold futures, we've also seen a slingshot type of trade. This one on the way up. I've been mentioning before that 1260 was the key pivot to watch there. And as long as price is above it, pullbacks into it or toward it should be defended for a shot at seeing this type of move. And this is very similar to what we talked about last time when we had the failed new low and then this thing led to a squeeze. Here was a failed new low yet again. A 2-day low, 3-day low where it wiped out those lows and started up, eventually closed well above and continues to slingshot higher. So that's been a very nice continuation. We hit our 1280 and now we're approaching 1300 to 1305, which is going to be a big time target up there. That would clean out or wipe out some of these recent highs. So anything above this high, which is basically right into about 98s, 97.40. Anything above that high into 98s, 1300 would be taking out that high, but getting above it like this, that could provide a little bit of fuel here that could lead to the next rotation back to 1260. So right now we're at the long end of the bull move here in crude ever since we got that squeeze above 1240. we're coming into the tail end of that move. We still might see another 10 to 15 handles up, but once we see that, it may be a return back toward 1260 at some point, so keep that in mind. Lastly, taking a look at silver, we've seen the same type of thing play out here. This is recently what I mentioned during the market outlook, the monthly market outlook for June 2017, also the pre-market report here on June 2nd. They all mentioned this slingshot type of trade here where we're in a trending market. We see price wipe out all these stops below these lows, yet close higher into the range. And then we had our retest entry here that led to the recent squeeze higher. So a very nice continuation. This thing has more upside into the 1781s and 18s. So those are the next two upside targets here for the week as we continue higher. All counter trend rotations likely to be defended short term, as this thing has a shot to really start making its way up toward these next upside targets. All right, that's it for now. Let's see how this thing plays out heading into the rest of the session. Good luck and trade well.